Hey YouTube, it's Fred. I figured let's go for a drive in my new Mini. All right, well, welcome to the Mini. I finally got my RAM mount for my cell phone so that I can film. And I figured after getting home from work tonight, it's a nice night, and figured I'd go for a little bit of a drive. The Mini, it's a 2016. I don't think I mentioned that in the last video. And it's a CPO. It had about 27,700 miles on it, and I just knocked it over into 28,000 or so. It is a blast to drive. It is much faster than I expected. It handles great. It's stable on the highway. It's comfortable. It's quiet. Really kind of surprised at how nice this is. BMW definitely has done a good job since they took over manufacturing. I don't know a lot about the history, but I know that the third gen is the first one that was kind of fully designed and built by BMW. And yeah, it's a riot. I am enjoying it. I live in New Hampshire, and kind of on the southern end of the state, and there's a lot of back roads and kind of windy stuff, and the car just loves it out here. It's a 6-speed manual. You put the clutch in, and whatever gear you downshift to, it automatically blips the throttle, and it's fantastic. It does it so seamlessly and so smoothly, you feel like a superhero with your shifting. This thing sounds really good. One of the things I really like is that the exhaust is sporty, but it's not super loud. So I'm going to flip it here into sport mode, and I'll talk about the modes here in a second. So one of the cool things is that it's very obvious when you switch modes. Oh, yeah! I don't know if you'll get any of the kind of snaps and crackles. When you downshift in sport mode, it must dump a little bit of extra fuel into the exhaust, because you definitely get kind of the popping and crackling as you go along. And man, it makes it feel like a little Formula One go-kart. The handling is really good, which I'm going on a pretty windy little road here, and man, it just sticks to the pavement. It's light, and you know what? I'm going 30 miles an hour. It's fantastic because you can have a blast and be doing it at street legal speeds. The brakes are pretty good. They're definitely not as good as a dedicated sports car or something like the Corvette, where it's, you know, the rotors are basically as big as the wheels in this car. But they're pretty good. They can stop the car pretty quickly. I've pressed pretty hard on them, and I haven't had the ABS engage. And overall I feel like they're decent, but it might be something that I'd upgrade at some point soon. But yeah, this thing, oh man, this road is really good. There's a bunch of really sharp corners, and there's nobody out here. It's just a bunch of country roads. This is a sharp one. Woo! Ha! And I'm going 30. How about that? In fact, actually, I think the speed limit's 35 here. It's super. Anyway, I live in a pretty great area for this stuff. Just being able to, after work, my wife's not going to be home for about an hour, so I can just bomb around a few of the back roads near me and just kind of explore, see what's around. And I'm also getting about 25 to 30 miles a gallon right now. On the highway, I've seen when I have it in 6th and I'm going about 70, you know, with flow of traffic going into the city, I've seen, you know, the kind of fuel reading show somewhere around 36 to 38 pretty consistently. You know, you go up a little hill, you'll see it drop a little bit. You go down a hill, you'll see it show like 99 miles per gallon. But realistically, like mid-30s is the tail. And this is the S version. This is the one that makes I think it's 189 horsepower, somewhere in the realm of 200 foot-pounds of torque. And even with all that power and the turbo, it's still fuel efficient. You know, I will say Colin Chapman from Lotus knew what he was talking about when he was saying, you know, it's more important to make a car light than it is to make it powerful. And through speed through lightness, or I don't know, take away lightness, and I forget what the quote is, but it's something really good. I'll see if I can remember that later. But it's a good quote, and it's true. This thing is fairly light. It's 2,400, 2,500 pounds, I think, and yet it handles like a hummingbird. It's fantastic. So driving modes and engine modes. There's a green mode, which I'm not in currently, but that green mode, it goes through and lets you drive it dulls the throttle response. I don't know if it lowers the max RPM, but it basically makes the car a lot more docile. It doesn't have, I don't think it has as much power, I'm not sure. But it helps you get the best fuel economy. The gauges up front here, they actually change and show you kind of a band as far as where you should be to maximize fuel economy. And so that's something that, you know, for highway trips or when you're trying to make the gas go a little bit further, you can use that. And I'm gonna at some point spend some time in that mode and see what I can really get for realistic like highway and then city driving, and I'll report back. Mid mode, that's what I'm in right now, and that's my favorite mode actually. It's sort of like the normal mode. It lets you accelerate. You have full power. It does spool the turbo up a little bit, kind of at all times, but there's definitely some lag. You know, you get the first like 1,000, 1,500 RPM, and you're not making much power. But then once you get to, you know, the 1,500 or so, the power really kicks in, and there's this surge of torque, as you can see right now, and it really pulls the car along. And from there, you know, you have the next mode, which is sport mode. And sport mode, it persistently keeps the turbo running at a higher RPM. And what that does is that keeps you in the torque curve a lot more consistently, so that basically any speed. So I'll flip it into sport mode here, and I'm in fourth. And as soon as I press down, the car has a lot more torque. Obviously, it's more fun in some of the lower gears because you get a lot more torque. A lot more torque because you're running a little bit higher RPM. It also does something with the exhaust, as I think I mentioned. This guy is backing into a highway. I don't know why. I'm not sure that it's not my favorite mode from the perspective of I don't like the noise and the attention. It's a little bit loud. It's a little bit kind of boisterous. It definitely will grab some attention. And for people who don't know cars, it makes your cars sound a little bit like there's something wrong with it. You know, all the popping and crackling. Mid mode gives you the same amount of power. It's just slightly less aggressive, and the turbo has to spool up when you really, you know, put your foot down. But overall, they're both really fun. I am spending a fair amount of time when I'm not in the highway in sport mode, and this car is tailgating me like crazy. It's only 45 here, so I don't know why, but yeah. So anyway, those are the different driving modes. The girl behind me who's tailgating is jamming out to her music. As a Subaru WRX fan, I forget what his new channel is called. A Subaru WRX fan says, let's pull onto this curvy road and see how it does. Whoa! Yeah! But I had that glimmer. I had that moment where I was like, this is a lot of fun. Now that I own this thing, I love it. I was telling my wife the other day, I almost am of the mindset that if I had owned this before I owned the Corvette, I might not have bought the Corvette. The Corvette is still my favorite car. Still, I would prefer to be driving it 100% of the time. But this thing is, I'd say, like 80 to 85% of the overall fun and enjoyment. It's definitely not as fast, and it's 1/3 the price, which is pretty nice. But man, this thing on these windy roads. All right, we're going into sport mode here. We got some corners coming up. The big colorful circle here in the center changes color to red when you go into sport mode, which we just did. All right. A couple crackles on the downshift. On my glasses, I think you can see the color. I've got the wheels, the circle turned up to blue right now. I just saw it for a second. Oh man, this is great. getting 30 miles a gallon. How about that? You can actually have fun in a fuel-efficient car. Okay, the crackles are pretty cool. Even though they don't always sound the best, it definitely makes this thing feel like a race car. And I'm still going the speed limit, which is, like, truly I am. It's amazing that, I think that there's a saying also, I feel like I'm quoting stuff but getting all the quotes wrong. There's a saying that it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. And this isn't really going that fast, but it's super engaging at really normal speeds. I'm going 28 right now. All right, we're gonna turn onto this other little road. There's a couple good windy ones around here. And the speed limit picks up. And I'm out of sport mode again. The cracks and popples are pops. There are a couple houses around, so I don't want to annoy anybody. But man, this thing, it just puts a smile on your face. It handles good. It looks really cool, I think. And it's truly engaging as a driver's car. It's really fun. If only every car was this fun when you're driving, I think a lot more people would be into cars. And you don't have to do anything to it. This car, out of the box, as is a riot. It's so much fun. I do tend to think that car reviewers as a whole tend to be kind of a jaded bunch. Whether it's YouTube or a magazine or something, they start out, they review a couple regular cars, and then they're like, oh, hey, we got invited to a McLaren event, we got invited to a Mercedes event, Porsche, Lamborghini, all those brands. So you start driving all those things all the time, and all of a sudden you find that speed doesn't feel as fast. And what I've found is that, sometimes you look at a review and they're like, oh yeah, this thing, it's fun, it handles good, but definitely it's lost kind of that joy of driving, excitement. Sometimes that doesn't really come across in those reviews. So definitely with the Mini, I feel like I've been fortunate in that my perspective isn't skewed by a bunch of super high dollar, really fast hypercars, supercars with recent memory. It's faster than I expected, so I really enjoy it. I've driven some fast cars, nothing in super recent memory. The Corvette's fast, but then there's really fast, and I would put like the GT3 that I've been in, the Lamborghini, the Viper, those kind of things that I've had experiences in. Those are on kind of a different level. So I think it's good that I have the perspective of driving normal cars on a much more regular basis, which really makes something like this stand out. Anyway, hey, that's the drive, and I'm gonna have new content soon, and I'll be doing a video like this in the Corvette. See you soon. Bye. I wonder, can this do an e-brake slide? That might be something to find out in the winter.